Hey yogis, new video. Today we're going to talk about how to practice yoga when you're stressed. And a quick video, not too long. What we're going to talk about is if you think about the two types of stress, type 1 being, waiting for bad news. That's pretty much stress you just can't do anything about. So we're not going to talk about that one. We'll talk about it in another video some other time. But we're going to talk about what I'll call type 2 stress, and that is busy stress. So when you've got a lot on, basically. So it can be when you have deadlines coming, or there are people relying on you, that sort of thing. Okay. So a good way of thinking about that sort of stress is either if you have a high demand on you, or a regular amount of demand, but that demand has a high level of meaning that it's causing more stress than usual. So high demand could be cognitive demand, it could be physical demand, it could be emotional demand, or even spiritual demand on you. And that's the easy one to think about, but there can also be a chance here or a situation here where you have a regular level of demand, but that demand has a higher level of import or a higher level of meaning for you. So that can be, for example, if you are doing sporting events, but this is a more important event. Or if you're at a job and this is a more important client or sale or whatever that is. Or the same goes with family. There's a more important family thing going on. There can be a more important financial situation. Even if it's not taking more of your energy, it can cause more stress for this. So that summary, either a regular level of load or demand, and a high level of meaning, or a higher level of load or demand. Okay. So under these conditions, what we need to do from a yoga perspective is we need to reduce the strain of yoga. So as we always say, yoga should be there to support your life. We don't have our life to support yoga. And so in this situation, we want to reduce yoga's demand on our time, on our energy, and on anything else really. So the first rule will be, when you're practicing or choosing to practice Ashtanga when you're stressed, is just to do less. Now typically this will be a shorter practice or an easier practice, or both. So for someone who does full primary as their daily practice, they will, for example, practice up to Janu Shirshasana A and then go straight to back bending and closing. This is going to create more free time, obviously, and leave you with more physical energy, obviously, but then it also gives you more time for rest. Okay, what's important to think of here is we need to make sure that we give ourselves no opportunity to make that decision during the actual practice. It's really important that when we're practicing yoga and we're stressed, we don't have to make decisions when we're practicing yoga. That means you need to decide in advance what you're going to do. Now, if you do a little bit too little, if you don't do enough yoga, that's okay, that's fine. If you do a bit too much, well, you can just stop yourself. That's fine. You can tell if it's too much, lie down, take a rest, try again next time. Okay. But as best you can, really try not to give yourself the opportunity for decisions when you're stressed. Okay, your yoga practice needs to be a holiday from decision making. It really needs to be an opportunity where that mind, that decision making prefrontal cortex gets to take a break. It gets to relax. Okay. The second important point is when we're stressed, this type 2 stress, we typically have a situation where our mind is spinning round and round and round and round and round. So considering all the things we have to get done, or considering all that could go wrong when we do those things we have to get done. And so it's really nice to take away some of that cognitive capacity. Now, that's not physically possible to take away capacity. So instead, it's useful to occupy some of that capacity. And the reason for that is just to make sure that we don't have that opportunity, or we don't have the ability for our mind to spin around and around and around. And a good example of this is if you're ever driving and having a conversation with someone, and then get to a tricky intersection. Often you'll stop talking for a few seconds while you make a difficult turn across traffic or something like that. And then you'll naturally start talking again, but during that little moment, your brain was full of what it had to do, and so you didn't have free cognitive capacity to just blabber on with your friend. Well, in this situation, we want to manually take away some of that capacity. Okay. How do we do this? Well, one thing that I've done in the past and is useful for me is to focus on accuracy in the practice. So as an example, with my hand, I'll make sure I'm pretty lazy with my hands. I'll let them hang outside the mat, hang off the mat. I'll make sure that they sit in line inside the mat, nice and in line. Or when I jump through, I'll make sure that my feet don't skim the mat on the way through. It really isn't important what it is, but it's something that's going to take a little bit more of our mind than usual. So we don't have that ability to let our mind spin out of control and start thinking about the sort of thing that we're stressing over. Okay. It can be other things. It can be rhythm. So making sure your inhale and your exhale is exactly the same length. It can be making sure you make a straight line through vinyasa from one asana to the next. It can be making sure that your inhale and exhale sound as similar as possible. Or it can even be doing something like focusing on the breath, really focusing on the breath, as opposed to just letting your mind wander. Okay. So this second thing was taking up some cognitive capacity to stop the mind spinning out of control. Okay. This is a little bit more of a complicated way of looking at it, but from an Ashtanga perspective, when we look at the Ashtanga method of meditation, we can click back a step in the way we structure our meditations in Ashtanga. So if you think about a beginner, they focus on a gross object such as where do I move to, what pose comes next, what is there, what's the next pose, what is the movement here, where do I put my arm, my leg, how do I take the bind, okay, where do I put my management of bandhas, core, things like this. Dristi even is a good one, okay. So the gross object is our first object of meditation, but pretty soon an Ashtangi moves on to a subtle object of meditation, such as the Ujjayi breath. And then from this, we move on to no object of meditation. So that is just being the witness of all sensation, all thoughts, everything appearing in consciousness. And then from there, we move on to from everything that is witnessed to awareness itself, which then dissolves. And then from there, we obviously settle into Advaita. As we reflect back on that consciousness, the Advaita appears by itself. And from there, we relax into that sensation. And then eventually, everything starts happening by itself. Okay, so these are stages of meditation. The final one, being relaxed, settled into Advaita with everything happening all by itself and not really playing a part of it all. Okay. If, for example, the yogi was focused on a subtle object, they could then bring that back to focusing on a gross object. If a yogi was stressed, instead of just sitting in open awareness practice, they could bring that back a step to sitting on a subtle object, such as focusing on the breath. If it's all really getting too much and the mind is really active, then we can even introduce objects of meditation. And many students have found the best one of these is to go back to the count. So most yogis after a while will learn the count, the Ashtanga count. And it can be useful if we're really stressed that when we practice, literally in our mind, you don't have to say it out loud, but in our mind be saying, Ekam inhale, Dve exhale, Trini inhale, Chatwari exhale, Pancha inhale, Shat exhale, 1, 2, so on and so forth. And that can be a really good technique for those people whose minds are so active that we have to occupy a significant proportion of that mind in order to find some sort of relaxation. Now, hopefully over time, this meditation is going to work and you will come down into a more relaxed state of mind. And of course, the yoga does its job. And hopefully by the end of your practice, you'll be all relaxed. One thing that is important to note is that after a practice, when you're in a highly stressed state, it's going to take more effort, or better said, more time to come back into an anabolic state from a catabolic state. So to move back from a sympathetic state into a parasympathetic state. So try and have a longer shavasana or rest period at the end, and just let your mind wander, though if your mind is wandering to the items that stress you out, obviously that's not going to let you relax. You can put on music or an audiobook or anything that relaxes you, just to take you away from that distracting object. Yeah, that's it. So a quick summary. First, we spoke about 2 different types of stress, and we've focused on stress type number 2 here, which I call busy stress. Then we spoke about, under these conditions, what we want to do is reduce our mind's cognitive demands, physical demand, emotional demand, spiritual demand, okay? So that pretty much just means doing less yoga, okay? Try not to allow decisions to enter the yoga space. Do that before or after, okay? And then find something. If our mind has a tendency to spin out of control or latch onto thoughts, find something to occupy some of that excess cognitive capacity. And lastly, there was stepping one level back in the phases of meditation that a yogi does. Okay, that was today's video, and I'll see you on the mat. Bye.